Enrolled. That was the word on the screen. Not flagged, not queried. Enrolled. I had run that lookup maybe 4,000 times in 6 years. I knew exactly what each field meant. Provider name, NPI, enrollment date, taxonomy code. I read the line the way I read every line. Fast, professional, ready to move on. The provider name was mine. I pulled my chair back 3 inches without standing up. I put both hands flat on the desk. The heating unit under the window kicked on. That rattle it does every time, the one I've asked facilities to fix twice. And I remember thinking, they still haven't fixed it. That was my first thought, not about what I was looking at, about the heating unit. I am 33 years old. 4 years ago, someone used my name and my social security number to enroll as a Medicare billing provider in Beckley, West Virginia, without my knowledge and without my consent. Over the next 4 years, they billed $38,714 in fraudulent home health claims through that enrollment. The clinic listed on the paperwork was an LLC registered out of my parents' house on Garrison Avenue. The registered member of that LLC was my mother. Before I tell you what happened next, if you're finding this story for the first time, please like and subscribe. It genuinely helps. And tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Drop it in the comments. I read them. My name is Loretta Caudle. I'm 33 years old. I'm a certified professional coder, CPC, and I work in medical billing compliance for a hospital system in southern West Virginia. I grew up in Beckley. I still live here, 11 minutes from the house I grew up in, which I mention only because for a long time I thought the proximity was loyalty. I understand now it was something else. This is the story of 6 years of something I called family and what it actually was. I'm going to tell it the way it happened because the way it happened is the only way it makes sense. Isha, to understand why that Friday afternoon landed the way it did, I have to take you back to the fall of 2018 when I was 26 years old and had just passed my CPC exam on the first attempt, which fewer than 60% of test takers do. I remember sitting in my car in the parking lot of the testing center on Harper Road, a Wendy's Frosty melting in the cup holder because I'd promised myself one if I passed, and I'd bought it before going in because I needed to believe I would. And I called my mother. She said, "That's great, honey. Does that mean a raise?" I said, "I thought so, yes." She said, "Good, because your father's car insurance is due next month, and we're a little short." I didn't say anything for a moment. I looked at the Frosty. I said, "Okay, Mom, I'll figure something out." I was 26 years old. I had just passed a national certification exam. I had a melting Frosty and a mother who had moved from "congratulations" to "can you help with the car insurance in under 8 seconds?" And I told her I would figure something out. That moment is where this story actually starts. Not with the fraud, not with the confrontation, with the Frosty and the 8 seconds and the word okay. I grew up the oldest of 2 daughters on Garrison Avenue in the south side of Beckley, in a house my parents have rented since 1997. Like my father, Dale, worked the mines for 19 years until his back gave out in 2014. He's been on disability since then. $1,247 a month from SSDI. Which in Raleigh County means you are not comfortable, but you are not destitute. My mother, Darlene, has cleaned rooms at the Hampton Inn off Harper Road for 11 years, 22 hours a week, because going to full-time would affect her husband's Medicaid eligibility, and nobody in that house wanted to do that math again. My sister, Bryn, is 29. Bryn has my mother's face and my father's talent for making problems sound like other people's fault. She married Garrett Vance in 2022 in a ceremony at Calvary Baptist that cost, by my estimation, somewhere between $14,000 and $17,000. I was the maid of honor. I wore a dusty rose dress that cost $187 at David's Bridal in Beckley, and did my own hair, which I mention not for sympathy, but because it is a detail that I need you to remember later. Garrett works as a home health aide. He has a certified nursing aide certification, CNA, which he got in 2019 at a 6-week program at New River Community College. He's not a bad person in the way people mean when they say someone is a bad person. He is the kind of person who has never been told that what he wants does not automatically supersede what is right, and who found in my mother someone who agreed with him completely. The family dynamic, if I had to name it, and I've spent 2 years in therapy learning to name things, is what my therapist calls a resource extraction system built on emotional compliance, which sounds clinical. The lived version is this. I was the one who had a stable paycheck, who had learned to ask for nothing, and who had been trained since childhood to interpret my own needs as inconveniences, not through cruelty, through an accumulation of small moments, the kind that don't leave marks. I remember being 11 years old and winning a blue ribbon at the Raleigh County Science Fair. I ran home. I held it out to my mother in the kitchen. She hugged me. She did hug me. I want to be accurate. And then Bryn came in from her dance class upset because she'd forgotten a step in her routine, and my mother's arms left me to go to her. I stood in the kitchen holding the ribbon. Nobody asked to see it. My father was asleep on the couch. I put the ribbon in my room, in the drawer under my socks, and I did not mention the science fair again. That is not a dramatic story. That is a Tuesday, but Tuesdays accumulate. I started keeping a notebook when I was 24, a small navy blue one I bought at Dollar General for 69 cents. I'd seen a YouTube video about expense tracking and decided to try it because nobody in my family had ever explained to me how money actually worked, and I was tired of feeling like I was always one car repair behind. I wrote down everything: groceries, gas, rent, phone bill. And when my mother asked me for something, I wrote that down too. Not to keep score. I told myself I was not keeping score. I just needed it written somewhere. I needed one place where the number was real. The first entry is dated March 14th, 2018. $200. Mom, electric bill. She said she'd pay back end of month. She did not pay back end of month. I did not ask. I wrote a small asterisk next to the entry and moved on. I want to be clear about what kind of person I was in those years because it matters for what comes later. I was good at my job. I had been promoted twice by the time I was 28. I understood ICD-10 coding, EOB reconciliation, Medicare compliance guidelines, the actual mechanics of how medical billing works in the United States, which is to say I understood a system so complicated that most Americans have no idea what happens between their doctor's office and their insurance company. I was good at finding errors. I was good at finding fraud. I did it every single day for people whose names I would never know. I just hadn't looked at my own file. The money I gave my family between 2018 and 2024, I went back through the notebook eventually, which I will tell you about, totaled $23,440. I want to say that number slowly, the way I had to say it to myself the first time. It's $23,440. It did not come all at once. That is the important thing to understand. It came the way water gets into a foundation. Slow, ordinary, through gaps so small you don't notice them until the damage is already structural. April of 2019, my father's car registration, $340. My mother called on a Thursday and said Daddy's car is going to get impounded if we don't get this by Friday. I had $612 in checking. I sent $340 via Zelle and made a mental note to eat at home for 2 weeks. She gets her first paycheck from the salon. Bryn worked at the salon for 6 weeks. She never paid me back. When I mentioned it once, 6 months later, Bryn said she didn't remember it being a loan. My mother was in the room. She said, let's not make this a thing. Not make it. March of 2021. The thing I think about most, my father had a cardiac event, not a heart attack, the doctors were careful to say, but an acute coronary episode that kept him in the hospital for 4 days at CAMC in Charleston. My mother called me at work. I drove the hour to Charleston. I sat in the waiting room for 6 hours. When my father was stable, my mother took me aside and said the hospital was asking for an upfront cost share of $1,890 before certain procedures. She was confused about the bill, she said. Could I look at it? I looked at it. The $1,890 was real. The procedure was necessary. I put it on my care credit card, a medical credit card I'd opened 2 years earlier for a dentist visit and never quite paid off. And I told myself I would deal with it later. What I did not know then, what I would understand only much later when I was looking at a very different set of documents, is that by March of 2021, there was already money coming into my parents' house through a channel I didn't know existed. $38,000 distributed over 4 years in Medicare reimbursement payments, deposited into a business account at First Community Bank on Neville Street. My father's cardiac episode cost them nothing they couldn't have covered. My mother called me anyway. I drove to Charleston anyway. I put $1,890 on a credit card I didn't pay off for 14 months. The last time I gave money to my family before I found out, the last voluntary transfer was November of 2023. Bryn and Garrett were behind on their water bill. $217. My mother texted, Bryn's struggling a little this month. Can you help with something small? I Venmo'd $217 to Bryn with no note because I had learned that adding a note felt accusatory. Bryn sent back a thumbs up emoji. Not a thanks. A thumbs up. I put the phone down and stood at my kitchen window for a while. I live in a second-floor apartment on Eisenhower Drive, and my window faces the parking lot, and past it, a ridge of trees that turns extraordinary colors November. I stood there and I thought, I am so tired. Not angry, just tired in a way that felt load-bearing. I should tell you about Garrett more, because understanding him is part of understanding how this was possible. Garrett is not a complicated person. He believes the healthcare system is corrupt. He's not wrong about that, actually. And he has a remarkable ability to construct ethical frameworks in which his own comfort is the natural conclusion. He told Bryn once at dinner that insurance companies steal billions of dollars a year from regular people. And I remember thinking, yes, that is true, and I deal with the consequences of that theft in my work every day. What I did not imagine, what I could not have imagined, is that he had decided the solution was to steal back with my name without asking. At the time, I didn't know what the LLC registered to my parents' address actually was. I'd seen a piece of mail once, an envelope from the WV Secretary of State, and my mother had taken it from the kitchen counter quickly and said it was Garrett's business stuff. I let it go. I want to be honest about that. I let it go because I didn't want to know, and I didn't want to know because knowing would require me to act, and acting would require me to name what was happening, and naming it would cost me the only family I had. That was my choice. I made it. I'm not asking for absolution. I'm telling you because I think a lot of people watching this have made the same choice in different kitchens, and I want you to know you are not alone in having made it. Friday, February 9th, 2024, 2:47 in the afternoon. I was running end of month EOB reconciliation routine, the kind of work my hands can do while part of my brain thinks about what to have for dinner. I was cross-referencing a batch of claims against the CMS PECOS provider enrollment database, which is a public tool anyone with a computer can access, but which most people have no reason to know exists. I typed my batch verification query. The screen returned a result I hadn't queried. Provider name, Caudill Loretta A. Enrollment status, active. NPI, 1891234703. Taxonomy, 251 G00000X. Home Health Agency. Enrollment date, August 14th, 2020. I read it once. I read it again. I put both hands flat on the desk. The heating unit rattled. I thought about the heating unit. Then I opened a new tab. I went to the West Virginia Secretary of State's Business Registration Database. I searched Garrett and Associates Home Health LLC. The registration came back immediately. Filed August 2020. Registered agent Garrett R. Vance. Member Darlene F. Caudill. Business address 814 Garrison Avenue, Beckley, West Virginia 25801. My parents' address. I sat very still for a moment. The office was quiet. Two of my coworkers had left early. One was on a call with headphones on. The light through the window was the flat gray of February in West Virginia, the kind of light that makes everything look like it's been photocopied. I opened a FOIA request through the CMS portal. I requested Medicare remittance data for NPI 1891234-703 for the period August 2020 through present. Then I closed my laptop. I picked up my coffee cup, empty, had been empty for an hour, and I walked to the break room and stood at the sink and ran cold water over my hands. Not because I was overwhelmed. I need you to understand that. I was not panicking. I am a person who processes things slowly and then completely. And what I was doing at that sink was the processing. By the time the water ran cold all the way through, I already understood the shape of what had happened. I just needed the rest of the documentation to confirm the dimensions. The FOIA response came back in 11 business days. While I waited, I went through my navy blue notebook. I'd kept it faithfully, 6 years of expenses in my handwriting in pencil, because I liked being able to erase mistakes. I went through every entry. I added the family transfers. $23,440 over 71 months. Not round numbers. Never round numbers, because life does not happen in round numbers. $217 and $340 and $1,890 and $750 and once $63 for Bryn's parking ticket because she'd asked while I was in a good mood after my annual review. Then the FOIA data arrived. 7 phantom patients, 7 names, 7 Medicare IDs, 7 sets of home health claims filed over 4 years, services rendered, wound care, skilled nursing visits, home health aid services. Services never actually rendered because Garrett and Associates Home Health LLC had no physical office, no licensed nurses, no actual patients, just an NPI number in my name and an active enrollment in the CMS system that someone had set up in August of 2020 when I was 27 years old and did not know it was happening. One of the 7 patient names was Clarence Mabe. I recognized the last name immediately. Harold Mabe, Deacon. Harold Mabe was a longtime member of Calvary Baptist, a man my parents had known for 20 years. His father, Clarence, had died in March of 2021, which meant someone had filed home health claims for a dead man under my name for at least 7 months after his death. Garrett and Associates had billed Medicare for wound care on a dead man. $38,714. That is what my name was worth to them. That is the number. I sat with the documents for a long time. I did not cry. I thought about the Wendy's Frosty. I thought about the ribbon in the sock drawer. I thought about every time I had picked up a call from my mother and said, without hesitation, okay, I'll figure something out. I thought about what I'd figured out and what it had cost and what they had taken instead, because apparently figuring something out had not been sufficient for them. I knew something was wrong as early as 2021. I had let it go. I want to say that plainly, without self-pity and without excuse. I chose not to look because looking had a cost I wasn't ready to pay. I understand now why I made that choice. I was not stupid. I was not weak. I was a person who had been taught very effectively that her own clarity was a form of disloyalty. But I made that choice. I own it. A few weeks after the FOIA data came back, I drove up to Charleston for a continuing education seminar, 4 hours of compliance updates. The kind of thing you do twice a year to keep your certification current. At lunch, I sat next to Rhonda Adkins, a compliance supervisor at a hospital system in Kanawha County. We'd met once before at an AAPC workshop in Morgantown. As she's 51, direct, the kind of person who has been doing this work long enough to have no patience for vagueness. I told her what I'd found, not everything, just the shape of it, the fraudulent enrollment, the amount, the family. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "When you saw your name in that database, was your first reaction surprise or recognition?" I didn't answer right away. She didn't wait. She said, "I'm just asking because those are different things." I drove home thinking about that distinction. Surprise versus recognition. Because the honest answer, the answer I had been not giving myself for 3 weeks, was that when I saw my name in that database, some part of me had thought, of course. Not because I'd known specifically, but because the structure was familiar, because I had been a resource in that family for so long that it had stopped feeling like a choice they were making. It had become the weather. I decided, alone in my apartment on Eisenhower Drive on a Tuesday night in March, that I was going to end it. Not through a lawyer. I would deal with the legal questions separately, and I did, and that is a different story. I mean, I was going to end it in the room where it had always operated, in front of the people who had built their comfort on my compliance, in front of the community whose opinion they cared about most. I kept showing up. For 6 weeks after I made that decision, I answered my mother's texts. I helped my father refill a prescription he'd asked me to pick up. I went to Bryn's apartment for dinner once and sat across from Garrett and ate his pasta bake and talked about whether the Mountaineers would have a better season this year. There was one moment, dinner at my parents' early April, and when my mother mentioned that Calvary Baptist was having a rededication ceremony in May for the newly renovated fellowship hall. The family had donated to the renovation. She was proud about it, the way she was proud of the things she could mention at church. "Pastor Nichols wants to acknowledge the major donors," she said. "I'd love for you to be there. Show a united front." I looked at her across the dinner table. She was pouring sweet tea and not looking at me. "I'll be there," I said. I said it with a level voice. I had been practicing level. What I did before the ceremony, the thing I want you to understand is not revenge, not theater, was start a savings account, a separate one at MVB Bank in my name only. I set up a direct deposit split. $340 per paycheck, automatically transferred. By the time of the ceremony, I had $1,020 in an account that no one in my family knew existed and that was not connected to anything they could access. I tell you this because I want you to understand that I was not waiting to confront them. I was building something for myself. The confrontation was almost secondary. The rededication was on a Saturday in May. The fellowship hall at Calvary Baptist had been renovated with new flooring, new lighting, new folding tables with fabric skirting, which I noticed immediately because I had once attended a potluck in that hall where a table leg gave way under a slow cooker. The room held about 40 people, congregation members, deacons, a few people from the community the church served. Pastor Nichols had set up a small podium. There was a sheet cake from the Kroger on Eisenhower Drive, white with yellow flowers. I had worn my navy blazer, the one I wear to compliance meetings, the one that makes me feel like I know what I'm doing. I had the documents in a manila folder in my bag, which I know sounds like a cliche, but a manila folder is a manila folder, and there is no other way to carry documents. I had not rehearsed what I would say. I knew the facts. The facts were enough. I stood near the back wall at first. I could see my mother near the front talking to two women from the congregation. She was wearing her good blouse, the blue one with small white flowers that she wore to special occasions. Bryn and Garrett were by the refreshment table. Garrett had his hand on Bryn's back in the way he did in public, the performance of attentiveness. Deacon Harold Mabe was near the center of the room talking to Pastor Nichols. He was in his mid-60s, a tall man who had been coming to Calvary Baptist since before I was born. His father, Clarence, had been a member here too before he died. My mother saw me and waved. I walked toward her. The room was doing what rooms do before an official program begins. Soft conversation, the shuffle of people finding seats, the smell of coffee from the side table. I noticed my father was not there. His back had been bad this week, my mother had mentioned. I was glad he wasn't there. Pastor Nichols called the room to an order. He thanked the congregation for their generosity. He thanked several families by name, the Robinsons, the Hensleys, the Vances. When he said the Vance family through Darlene Caudill, my mother touched her collarbone the way she did when she was moved. I waited. Garrett made a small comment to the person next to him, something self-congratulatory. I couldn't hear the words, but I recognized the posture. He looked comfortable. He looked like a man who had been getting away with something for 4 years and had long since stopped thinking about it. That was the moment I had been waiting for. Not a dramatic moment, not a ceremony, just the ease of a man who had forgotten he should be careful. Mom, she turned. Her face was open, pleased, still in the warmth of the public acknowledgement. I need to talk to you and Garrett for a minute. She read something in my face. The warmth didn't leave exactly. It just recalculated. Now, Loretta? Pastor Nichols is still... Now. We stepped to the side of the room. Garrett came over with the automatic wariness of someone who has learned to watch for exits. I took the folder out of my bag. I set the first page on the table in front of them. It was the CMS PICOS printout, my name, my social security number, the last four, the enrollment date, the NPI. Darlene looked at it the way she looked at bills she hadn't opened yet, a quick flattening glance that contained a decision. Where did you get that? She said. The CMS provider enrollment database. It's public. Anyone can look. Garrett's jaw set. Loretta, this isn't the time! The second page is the WV Secretary of State registration for Garrett and Associates Home Health LLC. Your name, Mom. Garrett's name. Our address. I set it on the table. Garrett started to speak. The third page is the Medicare remittance summary. 4 years. 7 patients, $38,714. Silence. Not the kind of silence I'd imagined. The dramatic silence of a room going quiet. This was smaller. The 3 of us in a corner of a fellowship hall with a sheet cake from Kroger 20 feet away, and 40 people milling around talking about the new flooring. My mother said, Loretta, your father was so sick. He was. I know. I was there. I drove to Charleston. I put his cost share on my care credit card. You don't understand how scared I was. I understand exactly. And I meant it. I did not say it with softness, but I meant it. Page 4. And it was the claim detail for patient Clarence Mabe. Name, Medicare ID, dates of service, procedures, billed, services rendered 6 months after his death. Harold Mabe had walked over. Not toward me, just circulating the way people do in a room like this. He was 3 feet away when I set the page on the table. He saw the name, his father's name. He didn't say anything. He looked at the page, and then he looked at Garrett, and then he looked at my mother. He was not angry in the way I had imagined people becoming angry. He was simply still. He stepped back from the table. He walked to where Pastor Nichols was standing and said something quietly. Pastor Nichols looked over at us. Garrett said quietly, and with a flatness that I recognized as fear, "We need to talk about this somewhere else." "We're done talking about it somewhere else," I said. "That's the entire point." My mother looked at me, and for a moment, one small, unguarded moment before she reassembled herself, I saw something I had not expected. She looked tired, not guilty. Tired. The specific exhaustion of a person who's been holding a thing together by force of will for a very long time, and who has just seen the wall give way. "Loretta," she said very quietly, "I'm your mother." "I know," I said. She reached for the papers. "I have copies," I said. I picked up the folder. I put it in my bag. I smoothed the strap against my shoulder, which was a thing my hands did when they needed to do something. I looked at Garrett one more time. He was looking at the table. He was not going to speak again. Bryn had come over at some point. I hadn't noticed when. She was standing a few feet back, her hands together in front of her, looking at our mother with an expression I had seen her wear at the car accident she'd witnessed at 15. The expression of someone waiting to understand what has happened before they decide how to feel about it. I didn't speak to her. I walked toward the door. The room was still going. Conversations I couldn't hear. Someone laughed at something near the cake table. The new flooring was a warm laminate, light oak colored, the kind that would show scuff marks in 2 years. Behind me, I heard Harold Mabe say to someone, "I'm going to step out for some air." The door to the parking lot opened onto a May afternoon with a particular smell of southern West Virginia in spring, cut grass, and something damp from the ridge above town. I stood in the parking lot for a moment. I did not look back at the door. A few seconds later, Bryn came out. She stood next to me, not close, a few feet. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she said, "How long have you known?" "February." She was quiet. "Did you know?" I asked. "Not all of it," she said, and I believed her. I still believe her. I think she knew something was wrong and made the same choice I had made for years, and the choice not to look. I don't say that to excuse her. I say it because it's true, and because it's one of the things I still sit with. She didn't follow me to my car. She went back inside. The door closed behind her. Somewhere on the ridge, a crow. That night, I went home and I heated up the leftovers in my refrigerator, some rice I'd made Wednesday, some chicken, and I ate standing at my kitchen counter because I didn't feel like sitting down. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't sad either. There was a flatness to the evening that felt, for the first time in a long time, like honesty. Later, I went to my desk and I opened my navy blue notebook. I looked at the last entries. The $217 Venmo to Bryn in November. The thumbs up emoji. I held the pen for a while. I didn't write anything. There was nothing to write. The ledger was closed, and whatever came next would be something different. Not a new page in the same notebook, but an entirely different system of accounting. I left the notebook open on my desk. I went to bed. In the months after, the formal complaint to the HHS Office of Inspector General went through. The OIG opened an investigation. I was told this process takes time, and it has. As of now, there have been consequences, but they are incomplete because real consequences are always incomplete. Garrett and Associates, Home Health LLC was dissolved. The bank account was frozen. I don't know the full legal outcome. That part is not in my hands. My mother lost her standing with the deacons at Calvary Baptist, which is not a legal consequence and is not nothing. Pastor Nichols did not say anything publicly. He didn't have to. Harold Mabe stepped down from the donation committee. The room understood. Garrett and Bryn are still married. I don't know what she knows now. She texted me in June. One text, which said, "I'm sorry, I don't know if that's enough." I read it. I didn't respond yet. I'm still holding that. The way I told myself I would. Me some things. Like, I don't know what to say me some things. I don't know what to say to you. I said, "You don't have to say anything right now, Daddy." He said, "Okay." That was the whole conversation. I don't know what comes next with him. I'm letting it be unresolved. What I understand now that I didn't before, I thought the way I'd grown up, giving, not asking, making myself easy, was a personality trait. Something built in, something that was just Loretta. I understand now. It was a training. I understand that I was trained very effectively and probably without full awareness on anyone's part to be the kind of person who would not look in a database that would show me my own name. I was good at finding fraud in other people's files for 6 years because I had been taught to use that skill in every direction except one. That is what I know now, not a lesson, a fact about myself I did not have before. If you stayed with this story for the last 20 minutes, I want you to know that means something to me. 20 minutes is real time. You could have been somewhere else. If any part of this felt familiar, the 8 seconds between congratulations and can you help with something like, I'd like to know. Not what do you think? I mean, has someone in your life ever made your stability into their resource? Drop it in the comments. I want to read them. And if you're in a situation right now where you know something is wrong and you're choosing not to look, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I know why you're making that choice. I made it for years. I just want you to know that when you're ready to look, the documents will still be there. I'll have another story for you soon. Take care of yourselves.